Well, hello again, my friends, and welcome to the Young Chomsky Synth Hour, or I should say welcome back, like a welcome back. Welcome back to the Young Chomsky Synth Hour, where it's just you and me, no Liz and Brace, as much as we love them. We don't need any interruptions when we just want to talk about synthesizers, shoot the shit, and play a little music. So this is the second installment. Thank you for joining me here in my home. If you didn't join us last time, we'll do a little recap of the material we covered, because there will be a test. What we did last time is we did a little bit of a deep dive into some basics of Synthesis 101. Well, let me backtrack for a moment. 2 weeks ago, I was wearing a merino turtleneck in a sort of a top. Do you say top? That's not something I say out loud. And I had my gray flannel trousers from Cable Car Clothiers. And so today we've got the vintage Levi's snap front work shirt and the 50s Army chinos. So, having said that, what I'd like to do today will be a little bit different, but along the same lines. I want to start by kind of exploring a little making of behind something I'm working on. Just kind of, I guess I'll play it. It's not a lot to it yet. It's kind of a work in progress. So I'll play it. Really simple idea, and then just kind of pick it apart, show you the elements that make up this little piece, and then I'm probably going to develop it. Who knows? Maybe make it into a complete piece. So I actually posted a clip of this on Twitter the other night. And then maybe we'll talk a little bit more about some kind of synthesis concepts, and then revisit the ones that we talked about 2 weeks ago. Hopefully that sounds good to everybody. Cool. So we are again a little bit limited in our camera angles, but hopefully you can bear with me. So I'm just going to play this real quick, and then we're going to talk about it in some detail. So. You're not going to be able to see what I'm doing as I play this, but then I'm going to switch to handheld mode, and then we'll kind of look at exactly what's going on. So here we go. I'm going to bring my mic down. Alrighty.
Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, Chick-fil-A, Subway, Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, Chick-fil-A, Subway, Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, Chick-fil-A, Subway, Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, Chick-fil-A, Subway, Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, Chick-fil-A, Subway, Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, Chick-fil-A, Subway, Coca-Cola.
Cool. So that's the idea. Yeah. So let's talk about what's going on there. So I'm going to grab this, and let's take this apart. So Oh, I guess you. Sorry, I had my mic down. There you go. Hopefully you can hear me better now. Yeah, so let's take this apart. Again, there's not a lot happening here. It's pretty straightforward. Let's start by looking at the samples. Pretty simple. So this, hopefully, oh, what am I pointing at here? Looking at the digitact. So this is the electron digitact. All right, there we go. So the digitact is a sequencer and a sampler. So what that means is, let's see, it says on here, 8-voice, you probably can't see it on your screen, 8-voice digital drum computer and sampler. So this, you can load samples on it, meaning digital, little short recordings. And you can record sequences, meaning note data, and send it out to other instruments. So it can play itself, meaning it plays back the samples. Whoops. So it has samples on it, or it can play. It plays the other instruments that it's plugged into. Okay, so sample-wise, we have a kick drum here. This kick drum is from a sample pack. It's called Crystal Synthwave. It's from a guy, I don't remember his name, but he's a synthwave producer. And this is a nice, I think it's called Punch. And it is quite punchy. And so, you have controls, kind of limited, but pretty powerful controls on here for shaping the samples. So basically what I've done is I've pitched it down a little bit, 3 and some change semitones. And the digitact has some overdrive, so I've given it some overdrive, which I tend to do on most of the samples. So if I, the default character of this sample is this, and I've given it some of that overdrive, and I've pitched it down, so it sounds like that. We got a clap, and this clap actually was recorded by Chrome Sparks, who I was talking about last time as one of my favorite musicians, and he released this sample pack, and you can hear that's a pretty natural sounding clap that I just put a little overdrive on. Sometimes I'll put a high pass filter on a lot of the samples. This clap doesn't need it too much, but just to get rid of some low end, you could do that. There's your clap, snare. It's from that same. The snare has a reverb tail on it already. I'm not adding one in the digitact, even though the digitact has a pretty decent reverb. So, I don't know, not a lot to say about the snare, but there's the snare. So there's not a lot happening if I just play the pattern, right? It's a 4 on the floor kick, meaning it's just quarter notes in the kick. And by the way, the way you sequence on this is your classic XOX style sequencing, meaning this is a pattern of 16th notes and you just light up the ones that you want to play. So you can get a 4-bar pattern, so you hopefully can see that going by, right? Now if I wanted to add more, you'd see that, right? Okay, but I'm not doing that. I'm doing a really basic pattern with the kick. And then if you look at the clap, or when I eventually bring in the snare, I put that little fill on the end of the snare, but there's really nothing interesting happening there until the thing I want to point out that's kind of neat is what I've done with the hi-hat, which is, I think this was also a Chrome Sparks sample. Now this hi-hat sample is really not that interesting on its own, right? But you'll hear it when I bring it in here. Check this out. So kick and clap, and then I'm going to bring in the hi-hat. And I'm going to actually exaggerate the effect of what it's doing a little bit. So let's see. Can you guys hear the there's a little bit of a groove happening there. I'm just looking at the chat for some acknowledgement, but hopefully you can hear that. So, what all that the sequencing is happening is just straight up every 16th note, right? But there's a cool trick that you can do on the digitact. It's very easy to do on the digitact. You could do it on any sequencer, right? And here's what it sounds like again. So yeah, you hear the groove going on in that hi-hat, right? So what I've done is I'm using an LFO. So we didn't talk about the LFO last time as far as a feature of synthesis, but maybe we'll talk more about it later. LFO stands for low frequency oscillator, and it's another one of those things where if you learn it once, on one send, it's going to apply everywhere. Samplers will have LFOs, synthesizers will have LFOs, and we did talk about oscillators, right? An oscillator is what we were talking about, gives you the basic tone of your synthesizer. Well, a LFO, low frequency oscillator, is not something you hear. It's something that is too low frequency. It's to be heard. It's below the audio range, we say. So what you do is you apply it to modulate something else. That's probably might be over your head if this is all brand new to you. But the point is, we can choose a source, which I've got here. I'm not sure if you can see that, but the source is going to be that triangle wave, and we can choose the destination. And the destination I'm using here is the sample start. And so what I'm doing is I'm modulating the sample start point with an LFO. And so basically and I'm doing it in an eighth note rhythm. So there is this triangle wave that's kind of moving back and forth where the sample actually starts playing. And that's giving it that kind of groove. If I got rid of it, hopefully you can hear the difference, right? It just sounds totally straight and totally flat, like, I don't know, to me what comes to mind is like a Human League, I Want You to, or Don't You Want Me, or something like that, which is its own sound, which is cool. But if you want to have that kind of groove, I like to do this. Right? It gives it a little bit of a vibe. So that's about all there is to say about that stuff. Oh, and then the next thing too, let's talk about what's going on with the speech sample here, right? So the source of this, of course, was a Donald Trump speech, and this was fun for me because somebody tagged me on Twitter when this was posted, and now, not to invite like everybody to start doing this all the time, but it is a lot of fun when it's a good sample, and this was a great fucking sample. It had just like a musical quality to it, and yeah, like I heard this, and this has happened a few times. When I hear something like this, I just like immediately throw it onto this sampler, and I made this, not that this is a finished track, but I made what you hear in 30 minutes. So I put it on, I chopped it up into the constituent phrases.
Coca-Cola.
So basically this is just pitched down a little bit, it's got some overdrive, it's got some reverb. So let's hear just the speech part of this, or I'll put the kick on also. Here we go.
Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola. Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola. Chick-fil-A, Subway, Coca-Cola.
Okay, so a couple things going on there. The first two are just regular, the whole track is kind of a little overdriven, a little pitched down. Then over here, we've got this stutter effect, which is something that the Digitact calls it retrigger. And you can give it a rate and a length. So that's where he goes, Pepsi-Cola, right? That's a cool effect. So if you listen again, you'll hear when it hits this one.
Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola.
Right here.
Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola.
Right, so that's a cool effect. Just gives it some variation. And the last one, another really cool thing about the Digitact. See, one of the things I like about this box, it's physically small, it's simple in its interface, but it has a few things that give it additional possibilities and additional complexity. And one of those is what they call, what are these called? I'm forgetting. Trigger locks or something like that. Parameter locks. So basically, you have all your settings for your track. Say you've assigned a certain sample to it, but then any given step, you can go and change all of the specific parameters. So if you can make out what's on the screen, it's It's probably hard to, but if you can see the parameters that are kind of highlighted, those are the ones that I've changed for this particular step. So basically, the upshot of it is you can change, that's the way that, first of all, that I have different actual samples assigned to different steps, because any given track only can have one sample assigned to it. So this track, the sample here is
Coca-Cola.
It's Coca-Cola, right? But on different steps, you can make the sample instead be Pepsi-Cola, Chick-fil-A, or Subway. But not only can you change the sample, you can also, on this track, what I've done is pitch it down, increase the reverb, and increase the delay. So I want this particular step to be like the button, right? The kicker. So you'll see when it hits this step, you're going to get lower pitch, increased reverb, increased delay. So listen for that.
Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola. Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola. Chick-fil-A, Subway, Coca-Cola.
So you get that big delay tail as it comes back around on the 4-bar pattern. So that's pretty much what's going on with the samples. The other thing to talk about, I mean, what really kind of makes this tick is this synth sound. And this, I think, is really, so this is on the Prophet 6, and I think this is where it started. This is where the inspiration came. I mean, first of all, it was that sample, but then I brought the sample in and I wasn't sure, what the music was going to sound like, and then I came up with this sound on the Prophet. And so here's what we got. So this is one of those sounds, I mean, the Prophet is great in a lot of ways, but it's also, you can just kind of let it play and just get so much out of just tweaking it, right? So with this one, I'm starting out, with the low pass filter down, and we talked about this last time. So the low pass filter, it's making it dark, right? It's cutting those high frequencies. And then I start to open it up, it's going to brighten up. And then I'm also going to bring in that sub oscillator, and it's going to bring in some more bass sounds. Now, depending on what you're listening to this on, that might sound kind of subtle. Also, another kind of thing I did here, this also has a built-in effects. If you can see, this has a flanger effect on it. It's got a distortion that I was messing with. And then right before, another thing I kind of did with it is right before we kicked into the pattern where the snare came in, I played with the high pass filter. So that, I'll just show you again what that sounds like. So to me, that's a really cool, that makes me think of like Daft Punk or something, because you really thin out the sound, but in the opposite way of the low pass filter. So again, playing with the low pass filter, you're going to make it dark. It's going to sound, it's going to sound like this. But if you keep that open and play with the high pass filter, you can kind of thin it out and then cut the bass and then drop the bass back in. So that's the high pass filter, and then bring it back. So that's really fun. Oh, and then of course, the other thing that's happening here that I probably should have mentioned is we have an arpeggiator on. So the arpeggiator, now if I just play the keyboard, you'll hear, now this keyboard, this is a different synthesizer, but this is acting as a controller for that one. So an arpeggiator just takes note data and plays the notes that you're holding down in different ways, right? So you can maybe see the arpeggiator controls here. You can control what the rhythm of it is. You can control how many octaves and what order it plays in. So it's really cool. It's like an inspiring creative tool for live settings. If you're not like a good keyboard player like me, if you're trying to do creative effects, it's really cool. So yeah, this is based on an arpeggiator. And then the notes that are actually sequenced are very minimal here. This is just holding down one note in the first measure, one note in the second measure. So there's not a lot of notes sequenced there. It's mostly using that arpeggiator. In fact, if we turned off the arpeggiator and played it back, you're going to hear the notes that it's actually playing, which are, yeah, very few, right? So that is the magic of the arpeggiator. So it's 16th notes, 2 octaves. I could throw it up to 3 octaves, and you'll hear what that does. Gives you that extra high note. Cool. And then the last thing is when we go to this next pattern here, we bring in the Juno doing these chords. So let me play that on its own, or with the Prophet, I guess. So that's a pretty classic Juno pad. It's got the chorus on. So the Juno chorus is something that's really characteristic of this synthesizer. It's got a little bit of resonance. Here's that just by itself. So one last time, here's what that whole thing sounds like together.
Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola. Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola. Chick-fil-A. Subway. Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola. Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola. Chick-fil-A. Subway.
So yeah, hopefully that was a little bit illuminating. Any questions in particular on what was happening there? I am happy showing this. Can I briefly cover how things are connected? Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. So the Digitact, if you've worked with MIDI before, basically MIDI sends out data on different channels. So each instrument, you know, the Juno, the Prophet, the bass station, whatever, you set it to listen to a different channel. So whatever, it's arbitrary, it doesn't matter. You just want it to set to a different channel so that the data you send to one instrument only gets picked up by that instrument. And the Digitag actually has, it only has one MIDI out. So the key here is I have a MIDI splitter, a MIDI, it's called a MIDI through box, and it's from this company called MIDI Solutions. It's a quadra through, meaning it has one input and then it has 4 outputs. So all that does is it takes a MIDI cable going out from the Digitact, and then it takes, so that's its input, and then it has 4 outputs. So it takes what it gets from the Digitact and then sends that out 4 places, which I happen to have 4 synthesizers. So Digitact is just sending out stuff on different channels. So I assign, and it can send up to 8 because it's an 8-track. It has 8 tracks of MIDI sequencing. So if I had 4 more synthesizers, which I don't, and I physically don't have space for it, but I would need a bigger MIDI box, which you can get, and then you would just assign channels 1 through 8. So that's basically the key to it. And then as for audio, I have a 12-channel mixer here, and that's just audio mixing. Do I find the Little Juno satisfying? I mean, the Little Juno is only 4 voices, so that's not as good, but otherwise, yes, I do find it good. Let's see. I don't know, I could talk more about synth concepts, but I don't know, maybe at this point I will just play some music. Actually, here's what I had in mind. I was going to tell a little story. I was going to tell a little one from the vaults, a little young Chomsky origin story, if you all would indulge me for a minute. Thought the stand in the back was a rifle. No, those are mic stands. This is where the magic happens, my friends. Okay, anyway, yeah. All right. I'm going to tell a little backstory for you, and I'm going to ignore you all for a moment, because I thought this would be interesting and fun for me to do. And it's kind of weird just like being in my room and talking to nobody. But here we go. So this is a story about the last time I went on tour, because believe it or not, I used to make music before I was in a podcast, and I didn't always play synthesizers. I used to play guitars. Actually, I have guitars over there that you can't see that I don't really touch that often anymore, because I'm usually making music over here. And so this was like 10 years ago, I guess. I actually went to college and studied music and writing, and my plan when I graduated was basically just to record and tour, and I thought that would be that was about all I had planned. I thought that would somehow be a way to make a living and be successful. So the last time I went on tour, I was living in Philly, and the music that I made then, I was like a guitar player, and I was doing this real like jangle pop thing, but it was like very orchestral, you know. Now you have to remember this is, you know, the late aughts. This is the era of your Arcade's Fire, your Sufjan's Steven, your Wolf's Parade, what have you, your Interspol. So that's the kind of stuff I was into, and I still like that stuff. But I was not listening to like electronic music then. I played guitar and I sang, and I was real into like, you know, 60s pop, you know, Zombies and Beach Boys and whatnot. But I would do all this orchestration, and that was easy when I was in college and like had access to music students. Anyway, I recorded that stuff, so I went on tour. My band at that point, I mean, I used to play, it would be me and just like a rotating cast of characters, because it was always really hard for me to keep a band together. Go figure why that was. But it was me and different people, and so my touring band at that point, it was like me on guitar, and I had a bass player, a drummer, and a violinist. And that was like my way of trying to keep it compact, but also gesture towards this, you know, kind of symphonic thing. So the genesis of this was I had this bass player that I met in college, and he was he was a real character, and he was a professional poker player, and he was living in Las Vegas after college, and he suggested that we do this West Coast tour. And he said, I'm going to buy a van anyway. You know, I want to buy a van. So I'm going to buy this van, and let's do this West Coast tour. And we'll start in Vegas, because he's living in Las Vegas. And he says, well, we'll start in Vegas, and we'll go up the coast and back down, and it's going to be great. And so we all got on board and started planning it months out. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to take this really seriously. And so I booked this tour. You know, I just locked myself in a room, and I was just like the guy just sending these emails day in and day out. Because, you know, we were like this unknown. We had put out this one album by ourselves, and nobody knew who we were. But we managed to book shows. I managed to book us shows in like every city we wanted to play. Really filled out the schedule. And then I guess things started to go wrong. So I was staying in Las Vegas with the bass player. And I guess things started to go wrong well before the tour even started. Because there was like a misunderstanding, a miscommunication. I mean, it's funny to look back now. I mean, I'm trying to be kind of neutral in my language. Because I guess his expectation, I thought that I was kind of just like staying at my friend's place. But I guess his expectation was that I was earning my keep. I was supposed to earn my keep by like being the maid and like cleaning up for everybody. It was like me and him and a couple other people. But I didn't know that until one night he got really mad at me. But he was a really weird guy, mind you. So like I didn't know he was really mad at me until he texted me and he's like, it's late at night, and he's like, let's go get some donuts. And I said, okay. And we're in Las Vegas, mind you. Weird fucking place. And I've been in Las Vegas with like nothing to do except try to book shows. Like I don't have a job. I don't know anybody. I'm just like, I don't have a car. It was summertime. It was like 105 degrees. But so he texts me at like 10 p.m. and he's like, let's go get some donuts. I'm like, okay, whatever, sure. So I get in his car and we're just driving around. And at one point he just like pulls over onto the side of the road and we get out. And I don't know where the donuts are, what's going on. And then he says to me, he's like, we're not getting donuts. That Motel 6 is where you live now. He's like, I'm kicking you out. And I was like, what the fuck, man? That's wild. Let's hold on, back up for a second. And yeah, he explained, he told me why he was upset. And obviously I was upset and we kind of had it out. And then I remember saying to him like, okay, but let me go and like pack up my things if you're going to kick me out. And he was saying, no, I'm not going to let you pack up your things because now you have nothing to lose and you could just punch a hole in the wall. And I was like, don't be ridiculous, dude. I'm not going to punch a hole in the wall. I just want to pack up my own things. He's like, no, I won't let you do it. And then somehow eventually, like, I don't remember exactly what was said, but I like talked him down and he let me keep staying with him. But I remember then like secretly texting my other bandmates who hadn't arrived yet and being like, warning, shit is not going well here at home base. So then the other guys arrived and we did some rehearsal. And I had booked 19 shows on this tour. But we kept it together and we started off on the tour and we played the first couple shows. And I think we got 3 shows in and we all had a really big falling out with the bass player. I guess what it was over was like, it's silly in hindsight, but we had we really were jonesing for some weed. Everybody but the bass player who did not smoke weed. And like we finally got some and then we were traveling and the bass player was like really nervous about having it in the van. And oh yeah, speaking of the van, so I need to explain that part. He bought, I think my understanding or my supposition was like he wanted to buy a van that was like gonna be for that he was gonna keep. And it was gonna be like a newer, like a good van. But that was not the case. The case was he fancied himself, he was gonna like do some kind of flip. He was gonna be a van flipper. He was gonna do some flipping. So instead he bought this like 1985 van. And it was just like, it was a piece of shit. I mean, it was, had seen better days. It was not a good van. And we were planning to put like a lot of miles on this thing. And it was also like the last day before we were going to leave for this like up and down the West Coast jaunt before he finally bought it. I thought we were going to like arrive and he was going to have had a newer vehicle. But so anyway, we get in this big fight about it. We finally agree that we're throwing out our weed. But we're in San Diego and the next day, bass player just AWOL with the van with all our instruments in it, disappears. So the other 3 of us do not know where he is. He has absconded with our vehicle and our gear. He's not answering our texts. He is not picking up the phone. So finally, at the end of the day, he texts and he gives us the address and he says the keys to the van are at this Italian restaurant and you will never see me again. So because we thought that he like took off with the van and we weren't going to get our amps and our fucking instruments back. But so, and we were very upset. But we went to the Italian restaurant, we go to the maitre d' and we're like, do you have the keys to our van? And he said yes. So we got the van back and we never saw our bass player again. So that was 3 shows in through the 19-show tour that I had booked, and we had to just soldier on. Our configuration was drums, guitar, and violin, which all of a sudden, that's like the goofiest probably, arrangement of that configuration that you could do. I don't know, he wasn't like a very good bass player is the thing, but like you're really missing something without the bottom end of that. It just sounded goofy. So getting on with this here, as soon as he leaves, the shit hits the fan. The shit hits the van, if you will. We had multiple tire blowouts. I mean, all of them. We had to replace all the tires that were on the van, and then one of the new tires that we replaced. The alternator died while we were in Oregon. Well, we're going to a show in Bend, causing us to miss the show. A show that we actually had a guarantee for, like $100 guarantee. And we showed up, and I remember I tried to like give this guy like the hard sell, and I was like, "Look, man, we're here, and we had a guarantee, so that means you need to pay us." And he's like, "Yeah, but you're late." And I said, "I know, but like I tried to strong arm him, and he would not pay us, and we did not play, so we lost the money, and we had the alternator replaced." And then, let's see, I guess that was, then we went to Olympia. No, I guess Seattle was first. So Seattle is where we had to, we ended up sleeping on the street. Because every other place we went, we either had a friend there that would let us like sleep on their floor. Now, mind you, like gas was so expensive at this point, and we were not making money from these shows. I mean, we would make a little bit of money. There were some people coming to these shows, but not making back the money we were spending. We were like massively in the hole. So we were sleeping on couches and on floors. So either we knew somebody in every city, or we would make a friend. We had some charm amongst us. So we would like make a friend that night, and that worked everywhere except Seattle. And it was October at this point, so it was cold in Seattle. And that night was grim. It was not fun. I mean, I have had, I'm not going to lie to you, I've had like a very comfortable existence. I've always had secure housing. I've never had to sleep on the street, knock on wood, except that night. And it was not fun after, I mean, not literally on the street, it was in a van, but like playing a show, getting all fucking sweaty, and then having to sleep in a van, then having to get up the next day and do it again. Spirits were low, morale was low. And then so the next day we were in Olympia, and I remember just being so determined that was not gonna repeat itself. So mind you, again, this is like 2010. So I remember I went on couchsurfing.com and made a profile, and I'm just like desperately sending messages before the show. And I guess maybe at this point too, what I had learned was we were playing at this bar in Olympia, and it was like Halloween, either Halloween weekend or Halloween night. And there was supposed to be this big local band, this great local band that everybody loved, and the local band fucking canceled. So it was just us who had never been to Olympia. Nobody knew who we were, and it was like, you're fucking killing me. Now we had like hustled, and there was actually like a blurb in the paper talking about how great we were. We were this like symphonic pop experience. Now, mind you, we were actually this trio of violin, guitar, and drums. This raggedy crew of fucking dipshits. But so, yeah, obviously it seemed really dire. So we show up, and I am sending messages to people on Couchsurfing, and I remember, but like miraculously, like, angels from heaven, these two kind of middle-aged, slightly older couples show up because they had read about us in the paper, and they were very excited to hear our, jangly orchestral pop. And even when they saw that we were only 3 people, they were still excited. And they had really strong swinger energy. But whatever, they were sweet. And so I remember a guy messaged me on Couchsurfing, and he said like, "Oh, hey, yeah, I'm at Evergreen State College, and we have a spot for you." And I was like, "You know what? that's cool. I think we got a spot because these older hippie swingers can put us up. And he's like, oh, I'm glad you found a spot. If something changes, you can still stay with us. Just so you know that we're all going to be on acid. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Do you have any more acid? Can I get some? And he said, no, but I can give you mushrooms. So we ended up staying with the swingers, and we got mushrooms from that guy the next day. And the plan was to like go to some kind of redwood forest and eat the mushrooms. But that plan fell through when the last tragedy struck, and I'm coming to the close of this story momentarily. We were in the second to last stop of this tour, and skipping over the multiple collisions, not like serious collisions, we just like, I backed into a tree. I remember the violinist backed into a guy's car in LA, and I remember the guy was so mad. We ended up somehow escaping that situation, but he was like, this is LA, man, you can't do this. And we just got out of it. We just smooth talked it somehow. But yeah, that LA show was fun. It was a knitting factory. Anyway, so we're in San Diego and going to the Casbah to play the show, and we're on the highway, and I was driving this fucking van, and I remember I'm on the highway and I am trying to accelerate, and it is just not accelerating. I'm just like, it just won't go faster. It's just, I'm stuck at like 25 on the highway and people are honking at me, and I'm just like, what the fuck is going on? But eventually we got there, and I just tried to think like, maybe something was just, maybe it will resolve itself. Maybe it's something intermittently wrong with the vehicle. So the next day we had a day off before we had to get to Las Vegas again for one last show, and then fly back to the East Coast. And we took it to a transmission shop. I don't really know anything about cars and such. I know stuff about computers, guitars, now synthesizers, but not really then. And they looked at it, and the guy said, well, your transmission is shot. You only have first and second gear. And I said, okay, well, like, what's that going to cost to fix? And I think he was like, at least $3,000 or something like that. Something that was like a lot of money. You know, we're in the negative several $1,000s at this point. So we're like, okay, we don't have that. So I think it was called like Art's Transmission Shop or something. And we said, okay, Art, do you think we can make it to Las Vegas in this van? And I just remember he just immediately burst out laughing. And then he calls over to his buddy on the other side of the shop, and he's like, hey man, do you think these guys can make it to Las Vegas in this van? And then he starts laughing. But then he just kind of pauses for a second. Well, and then I explained to him, what our situation was. Maybe I told him a little of the backstory. And then he says, you know what? I think that if I were 20 years younger, I would do it. And that was all we needed to hear. I was like, Art, thank you. Thank you for your time. I know what we need to do. So we just went to the grocery store, and we just got some essentials. We just got a bunch of bottled water and like chips and salsa. And we went on the GPS, and we're like, all right, this is the plan. We have one of those GPS units on the dash that you had back then, and we plotted it in for like avoid major roads. And we're like, all right, it didn't have what is it? It didn't show you the RPMs of the engine on the dash, but there was a thermometer. And so we're just going to watch the thermometer, make sure it doesn't get too hot. And we're going to not go over 40 miles per hour. So it was like the movie Speed, but in reverse. So we plotted a route from San Diego to Las Vegas, keeping under 40 miles per hour. And I remember before we were out of the city of San Diego, there was a point where we saw smoke coming out from the hood, and we're like, oh fuck. And we pulled over, and we looked, and we're like, I don't know what this is. And so we just kept going, and it worked again. But it was very miserable. It took 12 hours. And we were on these really steep back roads through the mountains. But when I remember it now, there were some really beautiful really beautiful skies, you know, because there was no one around. When another car came, you could see it for like 5 minutes before it got close because it was so dark and so empty. But we kept having to stop because the engine would just get really hot. We're like, all right, got to pull over. And it was the kind of van that had the ladder on the back. And so we would just pull over and just climb up onto the top and just lie down and look at the stars. And, it sounds, and it was beautiful, but like I was so fucking bummed at the time. Like we were just in that van for so long and we had been on the road for 3 weeks and it just felt like such abject failure in every possible way. But we made it back to Las Vegas. And then I listed that van on Craigslist and I explained, what the issues with it were. And I managed to sell it for $1,200 to a guy. And the bass player had originally bought it for $2,400. And I told the bass player about it. I contacted him. And he was so pissed because he insisted that he should get $2,400 back. He wanted back what he paid for the van. And I was like, man, that is not happening. Like, we put a lot of miles on this thing and it had all these problems and we just spent all this money repairing it. We just, this is what we got for it. We got $1,200. I think that's really good. And he didn't want anything. He only wanted exactly what he paid for it. So we didn't give him anything and I never heard from him again. But we sold it for $1,200 and then flew back east. And that's the last time that I ever went on tour. So that's the story. Yeah. The end. All right, having said that, yeah, thanks. All right, now people are asking, thank you. People are asking questions again. All right, well, now I'm going to go back and I'm going to play a little ambient track for you. Sounds like a standard tour. Yeah, I mean, that's what happens. Yeah, dude, this is live. All right, I am going to turn this so maybe you can get a slightly better view. It's a little bit, yeah. I don't know. That's probably the best I can do. All right, so we're gonna do this guy. Now, before I start with this one, I'm gonna say that I feel like I came up with this the other night while I was, pretty fucking baked, which maybe goes without saying, but it's just really funny to me. This had a really particular vibe in my mind. It really brought me to a particular place, and I'm very curious. I'm gonna ask the chat after I finish playing if it conjured anything in particular for you as you listen to it, and I will be extremely tickled if anybody, has the same reaction. So, let's see. Also. Oh, my vape is across the room. Oh, well. Okay. So, yeah, enjoy. You know, I changed the sounds by accident before. Whoops. So it didn't have the exact same vibe. Somebody says chiptune. That's pretty close to what I was feeling. Anybody have any other thoughts? I'm just really curious if anybody had any specific associations with that. Minecraft, all right. Tangerine Dream, I like that. That makes me feel good. SimCity, okay. Final Fantasy, yeah, I'm loving all these. Yeah, I mean, I kind of fucked up. I guess I misjuggled one of my presets, but what I was feeling when I was making this was fucking underwater level of Donkey Kong Country. So I was on that vibe a little bit more accurately last night, but that's where my head was. Aquatic ambience, exactly. Man, Donkey Kong Country was so fucking tight. Okay, I'm gonna do one more track here. This one is a little bit less. Not so ambient, but this is actually, I don't know, it's not really a dance track as such. I was feeling pretty emotional when I was playing this one earlier, so we will see how we feel about it. I don't know if this is a sad track, maybe it takes us back to a better time, but here we go. Hopefully I remember what I'm doing with this one. Oh yeah. That. Juggling presets is a pain. Okay, I think we're ready. Oh, why is this not wanting to zero?
Sanders. No surrender.
4-day week.
Well, thank you for listening. Yeah, so that will be recorded and released at some point. Thanks so much. Do those songs have names? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, me too. Oh, my glove love. Thank you. Good call. Yeah. Thank you for listening. That is what I have prepared. I'll take a few minutes to talk to you all. Yeah. Where do I usually release my stuff? Yeah, I mean, I have been putting it on SoundCloud. I haven't put anything new on SoundCloud in a minute because, 2 podcast episodes a week. Lately, I don't know, when I can, I really like to record new stuff for the podcast. I mean, a lot of times what you hear, the little interstitials are like, tracks that I have up there. But sometimes, it really depends on like what's happening in my life and my schedule. But if I can, I will just like go and record something. And sometimes I feel bad because people will say like, what's that track? Which is cool. I love when people do that. But sometimes it isn't anything except I made it for the episode. So yeah, I'm glad that you folks want to hear more. I plan to release music. But hopefully we're going to make this a thing. I'm going to keep this stream going. And I do have some plans to hopefully have some guests, some musical guests in this little synth stream as time goes on. So we're gonna add that to the format. So I'll be performing, I'll be talking, and I'm also hopefully gonna have some people, musicians, join me talking about their music and performing as well. So I'm really stoked for that. That might be starting as soon as next week. So keep an eye peeled for that. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions about music? Yeah, Synth Saturdays. More turtlenecks. Well, I don't really know if it's turtleneck weather, but did I like Stranger Things? Yeah, I mean, I didn't really care for the 3rd season. I mean, I gotta admit, like, I was talking about this with Liz, like, depends how cynically you want to view that stuff. It's, the cynical view is really easy to take. Like, I am a sucker for that kind of nostalgia. And I think it's interesting, right? Like in this era of algorithmic advertising, right? Like they know what we like, they know what we look at, and then they just kind of sell it back to us. And it's this, like we were discussing how it's this nostalgia for something that never existed. At the same time, I don't know, it's an aesthetic that I enjoy, but does it have anything more to it than superficial? It's like, hey, remember when things looked like this and sounded like this? Kind of. And it's like just this whole like referential thing. I don't know. I mean, look, I love the look and sound. I don't know. I thought the 3rd season was shitty in a lot of ways. But yeah, I mean, the whole thing turned me on to Survive, the guys who do the score. And I don't know, I mean, I think synthwave as a genre can go either way. I mean, it's, a lot of people would say it's kind of well past its prime, but I think people like Future Cop, who were pretty early on the scene, always played with that idea of nostalgia and like kind of 80s branding, and even back then, right? Like those cartoons that we used to watch were literally like existed to sell action figures, and like I grew up on that shit. I was Thundercats and like He-Man. It was like all about tie-ins with like comic books and action figures and fucking Star Wars. But it was very self-aware about that, the connotations of that era and the aesthetics of it. And I think, and guys like Mitch Murder also, I think the way they used samples and kind of commented on Reaganism, and a lot of that inspired me to take that, I think, to a more overt level with the stuff I'm doing as Young Chomsky musically, where I try to make it, like tell you that this is propaganda, as opposed to, maybe being controversial if I say like everything, all art is kind of propaganda, but some of it just like doesn't tell you that it is, right? Anyway, I don't know, I'm on a tangent. Do I like Chromatics? I fucking love Chromatics. I just was saying on Twitter last night, actually, just was listening to their new album. I guess I'm a little bit late to it, but I mean, I think the Chromatics records can be kind of uneven, but I don't know. And I've heard things about Johnny Jewel as like a person that are maybe not great. I don't know if they're true, but I love everything that he has done musically. Symmetry and Desire and Chromatics. So I really like his sense of musical aesthetics. When am I going to start being third mic on the pod? I don't know. I mean, I'm on the mic sometimes. I think that the pod is good how it is. So, maybe let's not fuck with it. Chromatics is a female vocalist, but Johnny Jewel is the producer. Last Black Man in SF. I saw it, and yeah, I don't know. A lot of people liked it. It didn't really grab me as a film. That's all. I thought it was very visually arresting, and I thought like auditorily and visually, I thought it was great. But as a film, I didn't really care for it. Exactly what this person is saying. It was really pretty and good music, but boring plot and bad pacing. Yeah, I have to agree. Thank you. Yeah, I do. I have a lot of fun doing those little bits and pieces in the podcast. So I like when people appreciate them. Listen to Untitled Tech. Nope. I will check that one out. All right. A couple more maybe, because I'm getting hungry. Give us a podcast to check out. It's called TrueAnon. It's fucking great. You should listen to it. Kavinsky, yeah, of course. Love it. He's great. I mean, the French, arguably the best nationality for electronic music. Thoughts on Behringer? I don't know. I don't really have an opinion. I think it's fine. I mean, I'm not going to get political about Behringer. Look, if people are getting... I like hardware, obviously. And if people who like couldn't afford hardware are like getting hardware from Behringer, I guess that's good. I guess there's always like getting secondhand hardware. I don't know, maybe people who are like in the industry, maybe somebody who like works at Moog or something has a different opinion. Maybe they fucking hate Behringer. I've never owned any Behringer gear, so I don't know. Like in theory, the idea of accessible hardware I think is good, obviously, but like I guess we'd have to think about at what cost, right? So I don't know. I don't really have a lot of insight into that, so I can't really say. My first synth. That's a good question. I guess the way I got started with hardware was the Volcas. They are these little Korg Korg makes a bunch of mini little boxes called the Volca series, and they have a bunch of, I think I got the Volca Beats. I owned a bunch of Volcas that I bought and sold. I mean, one of the cool things about hardware synths, and I treat clothes this way too. Like, you buy something and then you sell it. If you don't, not like I'm doing this. You still want to be like responsible. Don't buy things that you don't think you actually want. But like, nice things hold their value. So, to some extent, I have owned a whole bunch of synths that I no longer have, and they now have new owners that hopefully are enjoying them. But if I'm no longer feeling good about a synth, I move on. I let it go. Also, if I want a new synth, I have to let an old one go. Same thing. Like, my closet's not that big. So if I, at some point, like, I want to get a new jacket, I got to sell an old jacket. I want to get a new synth, I got to sell an old synth. So I've done that many times. I think I talked about this in the last stream. I used to have an actual Juno 106. I used to have an Oberheim Matrix 6, and I had those for a long time. And I'd made some recordings with those. I sampled them, and that was great. And I got to know like what that was, but I kind of moved on from it. Also, like I said, I had a bunch of Volcas. So those were my first. It was a good intro. I do recommend that maybe if you're like not sure about synthesis, it's a good way to learn. I think in general hardware is good. I think from there, I bought this Bass Station 2, which I still have. And I've had that for the longest of anything here. And I've never let it go. And I do really like that Bass Station. I think what people will tell you about the Bass Station is it's not a real character synth. You could never, you're not going to hear the Bass Station and be like, ah, yes, classic Bass Station 2 sound. Like you might with a Moog or a Juno. Juno sounds like a Juno. It's a real kind of bread and butter synth, but the interface is good. The key bed is good. It's really versatile. It's just, they did a firmware update a little while ago that gave it duophony, meaning it has two oscillators. You can play two different pitches with it. It's just a really, really great synth. So I actually use it. It's the only thing I have here with keys. So I use it as my MIDI controller. And yeah, I've had that for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. Let's see. Do I ever use microtones? Not really. Do I have any desire to get a Seaboard? I mean, I'm not really proficient on any kind of. I mean, I don't have the time to dedicate to being a good player. I'm more of a producer. It would be cool to be able to, like the way my idea of a live performance is like what you just watched. I twist knobs, I sequence stuff, and I twist knobs. And there's people who are even better at twisting knobs, and you can watch them on YouTube and who do crazy stuff. And so, like, to me, like, I can practice and do better at that. I'm not really, and who knows what's going to happen in the future. Maybe my interest will change, but I'm not really at this point trying to do virtuosic performance on any interest, stuff like that. My tattoos. Let's see. Well, the worker needs bread, but she needs roses too. Can you guys see that? Yeah. There you go. So those are my tattoos. Stop asking me to post hog. Don't DM me and ask me to post hog. I'll post hog when I'm good and ready, and you're not gonna know when that is. It's gonna be on my terms. So do I write in a journal? No, not really. But it seems like a nice thing to do. Thank you. My hog, my rules. Okay, well, I think I'm gonna close this up. thanks again for joining me here for the Young Chomsky Synth Hour. I don't know what I'm calling this exactly. I'll have to think of a snappy name so I can be consistent, because consistency is kind of my brand. But yeah, I think that we will be back. I'm going to do this at least every other Saturday, if not every Saturday. So please keep coming back. And I don't know if there's... I don't want to get inundated with requests, but if you have anything that you wanna learn about that's kind of in line with what I'm doing here, feel free to let me know. I think that this format feels pretty good. We'll try to maybe do some kind of breakdowns of stuff, do a little bit of tutorials of electronic music, and we'll do some we'll play some music for you. And like I said, I'm hoping to get some guests on soon. And I don't know, maybe I'll reach back in the memory banks and tell some more old war stories if I can think of any. So thanks again for tuning in, and tomorrow come on back, because it's another full team stream with your old pals Liz and Brace and me too. So everybody have a great night, stay safe, stay healthy, and keep your third eye open.